Mastodon is a heavy metal band that was formed in Atlanta, Georgia back in 2000. The group's longtime members, Troy Sanders, Brent Hinds, Bill Kelliher, and Brann Dailor, have stood for the creation of some of metal's most ambitious sounding albums in the 2000s and 2010s. But there's one album that helped them take the leap to become one of the pioneers of modern metal music. We're talking about Crack The Skye, an album that tells a story about everything from Tsarist Russia and astral traveling to wormholes and paralysis. Together with psychedelic, dark, and long-winded sounds, the album serves as an honorable memory of the drummer's sister, Skye Dailor, who committed suicide at the age of 14. Let's take a closer look. By the time Mastodon started to work on Crack The Skye, they had already made 3 amazing metal albums. One thing that these albums had in common was the style of music. They were all quite heavy, used progressive and technical rhythms, and sometimes very groove-based riffs. They also had overarching concepts. Remission represented the element of fire, and was also, just like Crack The Skye, dedicated to Brons' sister. Leviathan represented the element of water and was a musical adaptation of the classical American tale of Moby Dick. While the third album, Blood Mountain, represented the element of earth. It's following a character's climb to the top of a mountain in search of a crystal skull. Just like its predecessors, Crack The Skye is also representing an elemental force or energy. In this case, it's ether, the element of souls and spirits. In an interview, drummer Brann Dailor described the album as more focused compared to Blood Mountain. He concluded the interview by saying, "Maybe there's a deeper heart to this record that needed more exploring. There's definitely a deeper meaning in the album, but it's covered up by a very inventive and imaginative story." According to Dailor, the album's main character is paralyzed and unable to move his legs. So his personal choice of exploring the world is through astral traveling, by learning to control his spirit and leaving his physical body. Many people that are familiar with astral traveling and projection recall having a cord attached to their bodies, but the main character flies a little too close to the sun, burning off the cord, and as a result gets lost in the spiritual realm.
I flew beyond the sun before it was time, burning all the gold that held me inside my shell.
He gets sucked into a wormhole and meets some spirits. As he explains his situation to them, that he doesn't belong there and that he needs to find his way home, the spirits actually help him by sending him to a cult in Russia at the beginning of the 20th century. With the cult, he performs a religious ritual, and his spirit ends up in the body of Rasputin. If you haven't heard about Rasputin before, he's got a long and interesting story, but he was basically a Russian mystic and self-proclaimed holy man who befriended Tsar Nicholas II, the last monarch of Russia, and gained a lot of influence by doing so. There is very little certain knowledge about Rasputin's life, but Mastodon interprets his whole role as a usurper who wanted to steal the Russian monarch's position of power. After he became increasingly unpopular with the people, a group of noblemen killed him, and after his death, both Rasputin's and the main character's spirits were released. And as they flew together through the crack in the sky, Rasputin actually offered the main character to help him to find his way back home. His parents found his body and believes that he's dead, and they have to get him back before he's trapped in the spirit realm forever. As I told you, this is a very, very ambitious and imaginative story. Dailor actually never elaborated on the ending of the story, leaving many listeners to fill the gaps for themselves. In an attempt to find out what happened, I did a little bit of digging myself, and it seems like the lyrics of The Last Baron, the last track on the album, also lead you into a maze of unresolved questions. Some fans believe that the main character returns to his body, but because his body has been buried and he's unable to escape, he dies shortly after.
Save my soul,
Others believe that he returns to his body safely, but is unable to stare at the world because he no longer has the ability to do astral traveling, leaving his state of paralysis even more unbearable. Like I told you before, it's an incredibly inventive story, but it goes even deeper than this. The album is made with the memory of Brann Dailor's sister in mind. Her name, Skye Dailor, is even a part of the title of the album. In the story, the crack in the sky represents the gateway between the material and the ethereal world. But because the Skye is spelled the same way as his sister's name, maybe Dailor believes that this other dimension leads to his sister, that she somehow still exists somewhere in the universe. Who knows, right? Or maybe it's just a tribute to her after all, a clever wordplay on the original title of the album. But as Dailor said himself in an interview, her name was Skye, so Crack the Skye means a lot of different things. For me personally, it means the moment of being told you lost someone dear to you. That moment is enough to crack the sky. The title track on the album is possibly the one that relates the most with Skye's tragic story. Scott Kelly, the guitarist and vocalist of New Roses, was invited as a guest vocalist on this track, and about the production, he said, "I took it really seriously and I emailed with Brons' dad a couple of times and just talked to him about Skye. And then he sent me a photograph of her actually, and I sat there and I looked at that photograph of her and just kind of meditated on her and recorded the song with her picture there, and I just really tried to do it as real as I felt I could."
We had a certain type of death in common. It's rare for me to meet somebody that has a suicide in their life.
I mean, we talked about it a lot, he and I, so the song was carrying a lot of weight with it. I did not want to let them down on that one, really more than any of the other ones,
He asked for a picture of my sister so he could have it with him in the vocal booth. So he's a deep spiritual kind of person.
Definitely the heaviest thing I've ever done outside of Neurosis was Crack the Skye with those guys.
There was only 9 months of an age difference between Skye and Brann. They were very close as children, and it's probably an event that scarred Brann for the rest of his life. Since both Remission and Crack the Skye were made to honor the memory of Brann Dailor's sister, is there a connection between the two? Can they reveal something about Bronn's life and his relationship to her? The word remission is first and foremost something that means a state of healing. So maybe Brann felt like he was getting over his sister's death during that album. But then when he released Crack the Skye, something evoked his tragic memories. Crack the Skye is a very violent and visual term that perfectly describes a person who's falling into depression. Maybe his thoughts and feelings about her are cyclical and reappear with months and years in between. Now, these are just my thoughts, but the aspect that I think is most unique and ironic about this album is connected to their names. Brann might stem from the Norwegian word brann, which means fire. And what exactly do you see on the cover of Remission? A burning horse. Now, Skye obviously refers to Skye, and what do you see in the background of Crack the Skye's cover? It's most likely a wormhole, but it can also be seen as a portal up to heaven. This might actually be the link to the early inspiration for the band's use of elements as the base of their concepts. But my personal way of interpreting this is that Brann is the one who's left in hell from this incident. He's covered in flames, or in other words, in depressive thinking, while Skye ascended to heaven when she died. Crack the Skye is a captivating metal album from beginning to end. It has a concept that goes in two directions, in a very personal and real direction, and a more fantasy-inspired direction. I highly encourage you to check out the album and experience the concept for yourself. As you might have realized, I've only mentioned the story and the meaning behind this album in this video, but the music itself is out of this world too. And to know that it was inspired by classic staples of prog rock, such as In the Court of the Crimson King and Animals, is very easy to see and hear. So do yourself a favor and listen to this masterpiece.